All for one and one for all. United we stand, divided we fall. Alexander Dumas, The Three Musketeers.
We are each other's harvest. We are each other's business. We are each other's magnitude and bond. Gwendolyn Brooks.
Chaos is merely order waiting to be deciphered. Jose Saramago, The Double.
I think little by little I'll be able to solve my problems and survive. Frida Kahlo.
Anyway, I'm going to play some Skyrim.
Wait, no. I thought we were going to go get some lunch.
I'm not really hungry.
We're starving.
We? You don't know me like that. You don't know how much milk I like in my cereal.
None. We're vegan.
I'm a vegan. Me! Independent human!
All right. We're acting crazy. Let's just sit down and have some lunch.
Fine. Wait, no! I'm going to go for a walk and get out of this crazy house!
We're sorry, Mr. We're afraid we can't let you do that.
What's going on here?
You are bullying us. Goodbye.
Wait, no!
So we referenced Space Odyssey
Yep.
and the weakest link
Yep.
in that one.
Good.
Sure, that's
Fine, normal, everything's great. Welcome to the Get Commanded podcast by the Greensboro Commander community. It's the GCP by the GCC and POG, Palms Off Gaming, sponsor of this podcast. We're all uniting forces to help you to have better games of Commander. I'm your host, Walt.
And hello, Commander players. I'm your other host, James, and we will forever protect our writing process for these weird skits that we do. The writing process is actually just setting up a microphone in our house.
Yeah, I don't write mine. Do you write yours? No.
No, well that's...
No.
No, that's not...
What are you talking about, James?
No, all the lore in the Get Commanded universe is real, including the Space Commanders.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's incoming transmission. Let's go have a look at that. It's coming in from the deep depths of the galaxy from the Space Commanders. It's time to get commanded.
Your cooperation on your previous assignment is noted and appreciated. We now ask you to ruminate on specifically the colour white. Is it the colour of goodness? What are its wants? What are its desires? Who are its allies and who are its enemies? Additionally, what emotions do the mechanics of the white colour bring about in the subjective human experience of playing Commander?
Speaking of Get Commanded lore, it's this one again.
It's the other Space Commander.
The other one.
We normally hear from Mr. Serious, we think
Mr. Spooky.
Spooky,
Yeah.
man-ish sounding guy.
But this one is always obsessed with the feeling and a bit of human... The humanity that comes out of our game.
This one seems like the roguish scientist of the group, like the radical, I believe that maybe they have emotions after all. I'm not with you all.
I don't think we should nuke them. I think we should study them. I think they're beautiful creatures. Don't fire the missile. Thank you, this Space Commander.
Thank you, Space Commander.
I appreciate it.
We like that you think of us as real people.
Yeah.
You care about our feelings. That's nice. And you care about the best colour of magic.
No, I refuse to let you start this podcast episode that.
The best colour.
We play Commander.
The best colour.
It is the worst colour in our format.
The best.
You are so wrong.
The best colour.
Stop talking.
Best colour of magic.
Desperate for the last word there. Wow.
White! It's the best colour!
Okay,
Come on.
look, it's a pretty good colour. I'll give you that.
James, Dawn Charm. Come on.
Alright, Dawn
There's
Charm.
no Dawn Charm that's not white.
No, you're right. Sapphire charm exists though, and that's blue. That's wild.
Okay, all right, whatever.
All right. Well, look, I did a lot of research around color philosophy not long ago, and the Space Commanders were watching me, and they know that I've been reading a lot of philosophy around color, and
yeah, we talked about it a lot already in that the philosophy of color episode, right? We talked about like similar to this episode, like what colors wanted, what they were for, what the kind of like purpose of them was in Magic. So I guess now they want us to do kind of a deep dive on each color, and I think I'm with you. It makes sense that you lead this because you did all the reading that they asked of you.
Yes, I feel like this Space Commander might have my house bugged or something because I got really, really into color philosophy not long ago, and I find it fascinating. So yeah, definitely the context for this episode is in the episode The Color Philosophy, or The Philosophy of Color.
I think it's Philosophy of Color from memory, yeah.
That episode, I think it's about 5 episodes ago now.
4 or 5 episodes ago,
Go check it out, because that's going to provide a lot more context to this episode and each episode moving forward.
Definitely.
But this episode is the color white. So I want to completely smash your opinion and thought that white is the best color of Magic because it is the good color. Everyone will look at like Magic colors and be like, oh, there's philosophy in here inherently. There's like a story to be told. And white are the good guys, right? Right? Wrong. I remember reading an article by Mark Rosewater that literally started with the line, white is not the good color. Very explicitly. I've, by the way, linked a bunch of the articles that I've read as reference in our show notes.
Yeah, in the show notes, yeah.
So if you're interested, go check them all out. But good is already, like, as a term, good, is a little bit of a philosophical faux pas, I would say.
Right, so we're talking, like, morality-wise. Like,
Yes.
not good as in, like, the mechanic of the game and, like, being a good card. We mean, like, are you morally good? Are you doing the right thing?
Yeah.
Are you sort of pure and true? And
Whereas Smothering Tithe is a good card. It plays well and produces a lot of mana.
yes, we're talking about, is white good, as in, like, are white the good guys? Kind of
Yes,
thing.
like the heroes of the story.
Sure.
So in philosophy, saying something is purely good is a little bit challenging, and a lot of philosophers will kind of go toe-to-toe with you because good cannot be easily defined in any shape or form.
You're kind of asking to be disagreed with, I think, in philosophy. If you say, like, oh, this is the good philosophy, someone will be like, actually, here are 100 other examples.
For sure, but I think it's so easy to kind of like go for this good versus evil kind of type line of philosophy, and I think in Magic you'd instantly see this in, you know, black versus white kind of thing.
We see this in other fiction, definitely, like white being good and black being bad.
You know, even in like Legend of Zelda, Shadow Link is the evil Link, and Link is the white Link, you know.
Definitely.
There's definitely structure there that we know, but each color of Magic has its own definition of good.
Right.
Each color has its own definition of what is good. Each color believes that. So we're now going to look at like specifically what white looks at as good.
Right.
So what is white's version of good?
So this is similar in the color philosophy episode. You were talking about how Mark Rosewater kind of like personifies the colors and imagines them as like a person and asks questions like, would white do this?
Yes.
So I guess in this way we're going like, okay, if white is standing in front of us, like a person who represents all of the context of what white is as a color.
Lived out white's philosophy.
Yeah. What would their like merits be? Like what makes them good?
Yes, or what they believe is good in the world.
Yeah, right. So if you ask them, what do you do that's the right thing to do? This is what they'd say.
Well, I think if you asked white, what do you want? What is like your want in the world?
Sure.
I think the answer would probably come down to like 3 main pillars.
Yep.
I think pillar 1 would be peace. I think white is constantly looking for peace.
Yep.
The other is similar to that, but slightly different, is unity. Peace is kind of like an agreement that everyone lives in this harmony, but unity is about working together for that. Like me and you can live in peace but have very different lifestyles, whereas unity is about like combining and like having this
community and
having this similar focus of lifestyle and belief.
Yeah.
And I think the last pillar, which is the kind of the stronger pillar in my opinion of white, is order. White believes that it should have order, and I think when you put peace, unity, and order, you kind of naturally look at that and you go, well, that is like a good thing, right? Like having peace, having unity, and some order in the world, that's good, right?
Yeah, I think you'd say so.
All right, well, I'll propose you this question. Do you believe fascism is good? You, actually went inwards into your body then, being asked that question?
I turned into a little goblin for a moment there.
Don't know what that air escaping your lungs was.
This is might shock some of our viewers, I think, James.
Your political view. I'm interested. So what is Walt's on record position on fascism?
Look, I reckon it's not it.
No.
It's not where it's at.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, no, good. Nah, not good.
No,
not good.
No fascism.
Nah.
Bad fascism.
Don't
fascist.
No. Avoid. Just stop it.
Okay, but fascism also believes in a final peace and order and unity. Does it not?
No, it's true. I actually went on a Wikipedia tangent today and was reading about a fascist regime. Of Germany. Quite notable.
A bit of a famous one?
Yeah, slightly famous one of those. I think when you break down the way that fascism is sold to people, it is kind of this idea
Peace,
of
unity, and order.
Only once we have order and only once we are all united in this exact purpose and usually a totalitarian state, then we can have peace and we can have justice.
It's sold to you in the way of if you obey by these rules, you'll have peace. You'll have peace.
I guess we could sort of argue that if you take whites' ideals to the extreme, you probably would arrive somewhere near fascism.
Like a totalitarianistic kind of
state. If you want peace and order, those are things that are sold to you by alt-right politicians all the time. They say to you, let's crack down on crime, get me elected, I'll enforce a police state. That's fascism 101, really.
Yeah, before I upset more white players, I'm going to move on from it, but I hope that this kind of shatters the idea that white is good.
Yes.
Because I think that we'll talk about white's flaws and go into it a little bit later on.
Sure.
But I think the next question that you typically ask the personified white color is, what are you motivated by? And I think honestly white would answer with, I'm motivated by my own sense of morality. I believe so strongly in my goal of finalizing peace and order and harmony and this kind of unity together that it's less of a physical motivation, more of a moral obligation to getting to that end goal of having peace and structure in this kind of set world that it believes in. That's its motivation, is its end goal.
I think it also, you could contrast this, and I'm sure we're going to look into it later, but you could contrast this with something like blue, where it does desire things, but it sort of desires them from an intellectual standpoint.
Yes.
Whereas white, I think, I agree with you, is really strongly tied to morality. It says, no, I know what is right and I must do it because of my strong moral code.
Yeah, and this is the interesting thing about, when you look at colour philosophically, is morality is a part of philosophy. It's not... Morality, some people get confused and go, morality is all of philosophy. What you think of good and bad is everything. But it breaks down more. But in this episode, you'll see that white, very concerned with morality.
Yeah,
What is good and bad.
A strong part of it.
All right, well, jumping back into the political spectrum, I've got another question for you.
Sure.
Based on what you understand of white and what we've already talked about in the colour philosophy episode, the philosophy of colour, what do you think white would be on the socialist and communist spectrum?
Oh.
Because for those that don't know, socialists believe more in resources owned by the citizens. So state resources being owned by citizens.
Sure. So this is if you work in a factory, you own the factory with everyone else who works there. It's kind of like a very simple way of understanding
That's the exact ideology, yeah.
Sure.
So, but with communism, this would be where the government owns basically everything. Government owns everything, but it is equally distributed to all.
So both believe in this redistribution of wealth. So they're both staunchly opposed to capitalism.
Yes.
Just inherently.
Yeah.
But yes, socialism believes that the way to do that is to give all that power to the people, and communism says no, the state should have all that power. I think I would say that it would depend a whole lot on which color you put white with. Because I think it fluctuates between the two. I think they both...
What happens when you combine those philosophies?
I think, to be honest, I would have to say they generally probably are closer to socialist, but I think it really depends, because if you put them with blue, I would say no, 100% that's communist.
Yeah.
White, black, I would say is also, like, we see literally the Orzhov Syndicate are about
banks.
law.
They're the banks on Ravnica.
Yeah, and they are, and yes, they are like guilds and stuff. So that I think is that's more on the communism side. But then white, green and white, red are way more socialist, I would say, where they're like, no, that's about all of us being one and together we achieve our goals. I would say that's 100% that's socialism. So I think it depends.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you decided to combine. I mean, you immediately went, oh, white sits in that area, but to push it one side or the other, it needs another philosophy backed behind it, which is really interesting.
I think so.
I think white generally wants to be like united. So like that unity thing kind of lines up with these distribution of wealth ideologies and like, you know, the Marxism kind of spectrum, because it is against this capitalist philosophy in general.
Sure.
But then when you combine it with another color, that's where its kind of true political spectrum comes in.
It's interesting that all of these, because we've actually now discussed 3 different ideologies of fascism, socialism, and communism. Fascism, obviously, famously, not typically one that goes hand in hand with communism or socialism, really. Mostly.
That's another podcast.
It's a whole other
not
podcast,
on our channel,
and not something we know very much about. But it's interesting that the key thing that all of those have in common is they are all about a collective action. All of them are like you would not say about... It doesn't
work if only one person believes it. It only works if everyone believes it. Yeah.
Yes. And then it's just sort of the means to an end, and also the distribution and where the power sits is different. Yes. But yeah, everyone's buying into it usually.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think this is interesting because like when we look at those power or political structures that we've kind of identified that white aligns itself to, I think the main thing that white believes then is that suffering is caused by this lack of forethought for the common good. That's where white believes that the world is wrong and needs to fix it. That's where white looks at a world that is ruled by individualism, capitalism, this like, I will strive to be better for myself. I think white looks at that and goes, no, that's not... If you believe that, you're actively going against what I believe to be good. And I think that's why, I mean, I just said individualism. What did I say in the philosophy of color episode?
Yeah, there's a couple of colours that immediately come to mind that are very much about individualism.
Yes, and who are the enemy colours of white?
Yeah, it's black and red.
Yeah,
which I would say are both very individualistic colours. I'm sure we're going to go into it more later.
For sure.
About allies and stuff like that. But yeah, no, definitely they're very opposed to that idea of it being about the collective.
Yeah, they're very much focused on themselves and, you know, wanting to promote their own benefit or their own progression.
Sure.
I think it's interesting how white goes about dealing with this when it comes up in society.
Like opposition.
Yeah, it goes about it in a way of, it doesn't want to remove them per se. It doesn't want to like kill the opposing ideas. It actually wants to convert them. I think that white, and this is often where we kind of see that white comes off quite preachy. It's a lot of religious iconography is used in the white cards, in artwork, even in flavor text.
Definitely.
I mean, you said it before, like the Orzhov Syndicate, they're very like the banks, which are very traditional kind of Elizabethan Gothic horror kind of buildings, which are very like religious focused, like these stained glass windows and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think that it generally wants to convert, less kill. It wants to make sure, like you said before, it only works when everyone is believing it.
Right, yeah.
So if I just kill someone, that's a wasted resource for the common good that can happen later.
Well, I mean, I think it's interesting that so many of the effects that you see most commonly in white that deal with like opposing creatures, which, you know, you can think of as like the beings that are opposed to white.
Yeah.
Are pacifism effects. Like,
yes, can't attack, can't block.
Can't attack, can't block. So it's like, rather than make you an opponent, they would rather say, no, you're sitting this one out.
Yes.
You know, either you're with us or move out of the way.
I'll put you in chains. Like, you can even
Yeah.
think of Heliod's Punishment.
Oh, yeah.
Is one where, like, you enchant... I can't remember the exact card, but it's an
an
enchantment aura.
Yeah.
But it basically puts 3 counters on the creature, and the only thing that the creature can do...
is tap and remove it. I think they're called task counters. I think they have to tap and remove a task counter.
And when the last one's removed, the enchantment sacrifice, I
Yes,
think.
but until then it can't attack or block, and the only activated ability it can do is tap, remove a task counter. Yeah.
It's interesting.
It is.
Do you see how it's like this... And it's called Heliod's Punishment. It's like, you have disagreed with the ideology of white. Therefore, I'm going to punish you so you think about what you've done.
Well, but it's interesting to contrast this with a card like Murder.
Yes, exactly.
If we talk about black having opponents in the way, like all of those cards just say like, get out of here, go for the throat.
Yeah.
Murder.
You're already dead.
You are already dead. You know,
Yeah.
these are explicitly saying, get out of my way or die.
Yeah.
And even red is lightning and chaos and like, you know, I'll strike you down.
If you get in my way, you could nearly die or straight up be obliterated.
Yeah, but white is generally more interested in like, either join us or move out of the way, but don't, not necessarily I'll stab you in the eyeball.
Yeah, I think this is, again, it kind of leads into other mechanics in white. Like, white is a very common stacks piece.
Yes.
Like, a lot of stacks effects come into white, and I think this is what now we're discussing how white implements its strategy, or what strategies it does implement to get to its end goal. And by having these common cards that are stacks cards, you know, these rule of law type effects, it implements rule of law, like quite on the nose. Like, it wants to implement some kind of rule, law, order to make sure people play on its turf.
I think it's interesting that while there are a lot of stacks pieces that are one-sided, like they only stacks your opponents, most stacks effects are white, and I would also say most stacks effects are symmetrical.
Yes.
So, like, you know, cards
all
like...
non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast.
Yeah, or each player can cast only 1 spell a turn. Like, that's we call those rule of law effects after the card Rule of Law, which is white, that says... all of us are casting 1 spell a turn. That's the way, and you can't not do it. You know, that's the only choice.
And they're the laws that I've set.
Yes, and we're all going to live by it, and I will live by it too. Which you can sort of contrast with, you know, there are other colors that sort of impose themselves on others. I think you see this a lot with black. And probably green, maybe a little bit. Anyway, but they're sort of very much like a, you know, we'll make you see our way. But they're not so much saying like, be one with us. You know, let's all play at the same table. Let's all play at the same rules.
Well, I mean, you think about like black's interaction in this way. A lot of black effects cause you to discard cards. But black plays in the graveyard.
Yeah.
So it's actually like selfishly taking your resources and putting them in a zone in Commander, which is in your graveyard, so it can play with them. So it's like, I'm going to take your resources and play with them.
Yeah.
I might have to discard as well, but I play in my graveyard too, so it's still mine. Whereas Rule of Law is like, you can't get around that.
No, I think it's really interesting. Now that I think about it, I can't think of almost any white cards that say gain control of X. You know what I mean? Like that say gain control of target artifact or gain control of target creature. I literally, outside of like obviously when they join with red cards or blue cards or whatever, I can't think of a single white card off the top of my head that
might
says...
have to do a Scryfall search.
I might have to do a Scryfall search for that. But it's the fact that we can't think of any means, I think that probably it's not something that they're doing.
Yeah, I think that Mark Rosewater put it really, really well in his 2015 article. It's called White Way Revised. He wrote one in like early 2000 called the Great White Way, and then he rewrote one called the White Way Revised.
Sure. And it's in the show notes, right?
It is in the show notes. Cool. It's all linked, so you can go have a look and read it. But he actually related the white philosophy to one of my all-time favorite books, 1984 by George Orwell.
Oh, geez, speaking of socialism.
Yes, well...
George Orwell had a lot to say about that.
You can say, 17-year-old James was infatuated with 1984.
I actually haven't read it, but I'd really like to at some point.
I have read it twice, and you know that I'm not a person that reads a lot of like novels.
Yep.
That's one of my all-time favorite books. Give it a read. But he relates it to... Obviously, you know, you already said it. It's got a strong view of socialism and kind of this redistribution of government control.
Yeah.
But he uses the term that is Orwellian and actually in the dictionary now. Like the Oxford Dictionary has this term in it called thought policing.
Oh, yeah. No, you totally hear about the thought police.
Yeah.
Basically says you can't even think about that.
Yes, if you're thinking about betraying the structure that we've provided, we will punish you for it.
And I think in 1984, again, I haven't read it, so forgive me if I'm wrong here.
Have you watched the movie?
I haven't, no.
Great film too.
But I believe that they literally do this, right?
Yes,
like
they
they are able
arrest
to
you.
police you based
Yeah.
on your thoughts. Yeah.
So this term, thought policing, has now become an English Oxford Dictionary word.
Yeah, I've heard it many times. Thought police. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that this is so white. This idea that if white could read your mind, it would tell you not to cast that spell. Do you know? And that's what rule of law effects are to me. That it's this like, don't even try it. You get one. You know? I'm the religion is coming back to me as like a clear example of this, for sure.
of saying like, you can't do that. That's forbidden. I am aware of everything and you can't do that. Yeah, that's really interesting.
It's really fun because this is the difference that I discovered when doing this kind of like reading into these philosophies, was the difference between moral disobedience and civil disobedience.
Right.
Civil disobedience is disobeying the law, right? Moral disobedience is disobeying morals. So if I was to steal from a shop, I am breaking the law. Mm-hmm. But if I was to, like, I don't know, go into that shop and, like, cause havoc in terms of, like, I'm not breaking any laws, but maybe disrupting and moving items around on the shelves.
And just yelling.
Yelling, being disruptive. It's not illegal, but I'm doing something immoral because I'm making that shopkeeper's life hard. They're going to have to go and rework all those shelves.
Right.
And it's this difference. I mean, even stealing, if white believes that that is morally wrong, it is not only a civil offense, but is a moral offense.
Right.
And white believes that it should stop moral offenses because that will lead to no civil offenses. It will build its law structure around what its morality is. If it believes murder is wrong, it will say it's illegal. But if it says murder's fine because it's morally okay to kill a bad person, murder is now legal.
Right, I see what you mean. There's no difference really between how someone, if we imagine that white colour personified again, if he had his way, or if they had their way, the laws would exactly reflect their moral code. They would say, everything that I believe is wrong is forbidden, and everything that I believe is right is legal.
So in the context of, our current law system, we know that theft is wrong, we know that murder is wrong. If white believed that theft is wrong because that is against the common good,
sure,
but murder is fine because you can murder a bad person, murder would be legal in their structure.
Ironically, a very black and white way of looking at the world.
Isn't it just? Isn't it just? I think that when you referred to religion earlier and the way that they police your mind in this way of like, I believe this, so therefore that will be illegal. It's this... I think the way they do it best is provoking guilt. This is the way religion does it very strongly. It's if you sin, God will dislike you.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of relying on this idea that at some point you will develop an internal narrative that comes from that external narrative, and then it will police you yourself
internally.
You will yourself police yourself.
Internally.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's super interesting. So while we also see that in white often is also perceived as charitable.
Oh, yeah.
Because their goal is the common good. So they have to spread charity. White takes care of other by encouraging others to like give without the expectation of return. And this is the dead to rights definition of volunteerism. White believes that volunteerism is a good thing. And this thought aligns with the fact that those at the bottom of society, they need to be cared for the most because they're not on our level. We need to bring them up to this level where we're all equal.
Level playing field.
Yes.
Yeah.
So obviously, we see cards like Impassioned Orator, which is like someone spreading the good word and stuff like that. It's very white to try and create this world in which people are charitable. And it actually does that by creating these systems like a court system, a military force, government, politics, to make it possible to change the way the world is. You need to have a military force to create change because you have to fight your enemies.
Right.
You need to have politics because that's where the laws are created. You need to understand the law system to change the world. So
they're definitely living they're living what they preach.
yes, very
The
much
white
so.
philosophy, yeah.
Well, I guess that this is probably a really good time to take a bit of a thrifty interlude.
Sure.
So we can see now that White values like the light and believes that, any information or behaviors that are done or contained for oneself is bad. But the common good is the end goal. So that individualism is the danger. And it needs to be eradicated. So this is, why we can see White isn't good or what it could possibly be. So we've got lots left to cover, including we'll go into the flaws a little bit more.
Yep.
And I also want to kind of personify White a little bit and talk about its allies and its enemies. But before we do that, it's time for a thrifty interlude.
You're reading it with me now. It's
I'm loving it.
disorienting. Well, I decided this week that I would feature a card. Well, I wanted to pick a White card explicitly.
That makes a lot of sense.
And I've actually realized I picked a card that depicts a really early moment in the story of the most quintessentially white planeswalker in Magic history.
Yes, I can see that.
Gideon, aka at this time in his story, Kithion of Miletus, which is on the Theros plane. So this card depicts basically Gideon's low point and the point at which he decided, no, what I've done is not right. I need to prioritize everybody else moving forward. So that's interesting. It really epitomizes White's philosophy. But yes, we'll do a quick little interlude. I'm gonna bring this card to life. In this case, there will be someone selling the card to you.
This guy has to have a name at this point, surely. I imagine him wearing a cloak.
Yes. He's a merchant. He's definitely a merchant.
Like selling wares out of a rusty old cart kind of thing.
I imagine the beginning of Aladdin? The guy who's...
yes.
The merchant at the very beginning? That's him. That's 100% him.
That works really well.
Voiced by Robin Williams. So I'm flattering myself. Would you like to read the card that I'm featuring this week, James?
I would love to. So this famous card in Gideon's story is Tragic Arrogance. For 3 white and a white, you'll get a sorcery that reads, for each player, you choose from among the permanents that player controls an artifact, a creature, an enchantment, and a planeswalker. Then each player sacrifices all other non-land permanents they control.
Ever get sick of people walking around with their head held high? Impoverished by pompous pontificators parading their perspectives on pointless positions? Well, karma has a new face, and its eyes are laser beams. I don't know what that means. The point is, it's all coming tumbling down for the conceited and the vain. And when it does come tumbling down, that's your chance to take what's owed. It's like the GFC if you had decided what happened to the bankers. If it was up to me, they wouldn't be bankers anymore. They'd be dead, tired, from all the cleaning I'd make them do. Get budgeted!
Well, at least now we know this hooded, figured merchant. At least we know his political position.
We do.
Yeah.
We also know he lived through 2008, weirdly.
So he's potentially still alive today.
He's at least 15.
At least 15? Was it 2008 15 years ago?
Yes.
Oh my god.
Oh, that's wild to think about. Well, if you'd like to catch more of me being strange, I do post these as text posts on our Discord server, which you can join in the show notes. And you can see me bring some of these to life in video form over on TikTok at G_Commander Community. So chuck us a follow on there to see them as they come out.
Awesome. All right. Back into white?
Yes, back into white. Well, we stayed in white, but back to it as
true,
well.
We were just in white, but now more into the philosophy of white.
Yes, back to the philosophy.
We get the tea brewing and let's pontificate on these pointless positions.
I'm ready.
All right, well, I think next in the phase of analyzing white is actually to kind of personify white a little bit.
Sure.
We talked about, personifying it with its political values, but when you do that, you kind of end up thinking of this grand scheme of, you know, a nation almost. You almost, instead of personifying it, you turn it into a country accidentally. So I think in this part of the podcast, I really want to kind of knuckle down and like really try and think of white as a person.
Sure.
And I think a very identifiable thing that is very human is having flaws.
Yep.
I think having flaws is innately very human experience. So for the space commander that's curious about human experiences, be bad at things. That's I think a really human experience.
It's true. Fail again.
Exactly. And I think when Mark Rosewater has written about flaws in colours, identities, and their philosophies, he actually really avoids the word flaw. I've noticed this when he writes about them, but he's occasionally slipped up when he's talked on his podcast, the Drive to Work podcast.
Yeah.
I think he refers to them in his articles as things that negatively drive the colour towards its objectives. So what are the things that are considered to us as the reader, the understander, a bit skewed in the way it's going about getting its objectives complete? So how is white getting to its end goal of peace, order, and unity?
So this is what it's doing actively. This is, we talked sort of a bit about its morality and how maybe that was a bit skewed, but this is sort of more about what's it doing and how's it going wrong in how it's doing it. Like what's it mistaken about, really.
Yes, and I think the key thing is looking at what it despises.
Right.
White absolutely, and we've talked about this earlier, despises individualism and self-expression and anything that is considered like, I am me, this is me, I want to do this.
I'm separate from everyone else.
Using the word I is actually a disgusting thing to the white person. It's like, ooh, how can you even consider yourself when there's a world full of people out there?
Right.
So I think it perceives this like personal, I have a value in the world and it's my value that I bring to the table that's uniquely me. White looks at it and goes, you're selfish, you're reckless, you're going to hurt the common good.
Okay.
And when it sees it, it just kind of goes, you know what? I hate you. I don't even want to be around you. You're gone. You're gone from my ideology. I can't even think that you're convertible. Anything that like reveals that of like selfishness, it's like, I'm out of here.
Well, it's interesting. I'm reminded of two of the cards we mentioned in our last episode when we were looking at some of the most efficient cards in Commander. White has the two most efficient removal spells, arguably, in Commander for creatures.
Yes.
Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshares. Interesting that neither of those kills the creature.
They exile it.
And, you get the implication from both of them. I mean, Swords to Plowshares is sort of more about the community thing because it's saying like, okay, I'm going to see your desire to do combat with me and I'm going to convert that into a desire to tend to the greater good, tend the field.
Swords to Plowshares. I think often a lot of people just say Swords to Plowshares as if it's one word.
Yeah.
Swords to Plowshares.
Yeah, and you can see this depicted in the art. There's my favorite version of the art is the one where it literally is someone with a sword,
and it turns into a hoe.
It turns into a hoe in their hand instead. But then Path to Exile is more explicit, of literally saying, if you're not with us, you are leaving these lands behind.
Yes.
It's very explicit in saying, like, yeah, you can be you can be selfish, you can be yourself,
but you're gonna do it all the way over there.
You can't
in
do
the
that.
exile zone of the playmat. By the exile zone, I mean put yourself back in the deck box that you came from. You don't belong on this battlefield.
It's worth
piss off.
Worth noting that the original text for things that were exiled was removed from the game.
Oh, that's true.
So it's literally, you could not be further away from being a part of the battlefield and a part of what's going on.
You're not even a part of the game.
You're not even a part of the game anymore. You're out of here. Yeah.
That's I hadn't thought of that. That's really poignant.
I think both of those cards were printed at a time when that was the wording
removed
as well.
from the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think obviously we see that as a pretty big flaw in why is this kind of like overcorrection is what I would refer to it as. This like, you don't abide by my rules, you don't believe in what I believe,
leave the country,
fuck off. Yeah. Like, absolutely. I think the other thing that White is negatively driven by is its own obsession. I think that the obsession kind of leads into that ideology, this like, you're not a part of my philosophy, bye-bye. It's because it's absolutely obsessed. It's blinded by its own wants that often at times, and I'm going to use a deck archetype here to explain this, often at times White is so obsessed with trying to obtain a peace and an order to a board state in Commander, it's trying to control all 4 players, including itself, that often it can box itself in, and you created a win-conless stacks deck that will make a game go for years on end without a near sight of victory because no player can win.
Yeah.
So it creates this like board state where everyone's like, all right, I will draw my 1 card for turn. I will cast a non-creature spell that costs me 8 mana more than I should usually cast it for. It's my only spell for turn. I can't go to combat. I have to go to my discard step. I've only got 2 cards in hand anyway. I pass the turn. And then the next player does the exact same thing, and this repeats for 6 hours. Can you tell I don't like playing in these Commander pods?
I mean, we talked before about Law and Order and how it relates to White. Maybe this is Bureaucracy, the deck.
That's exactly what it is. White's like...
Obey everything. Obey everything. Obey everything. It'll take you 8 hours.
White is essentially the type of colour that would be like, to cast that spell, please fill out Form B, and you'll get that from aisle 7. That is 3-hour long line. You'll have to wait there.
You misspelled your name. Start again.
Please line up at the back of aisle 7.
The replacement forms are at the other end of the store.
Wait, no, you filled out the pink slip. We need you to fill out the blue slip.
Yes, and the pink slip, of course, is also blue. We just call it the pink slip because it's fun.
Yeah, and fuck you and your time. I think that this is one of the things, and you can tell that it frustrates the hell out of me because it opposes my colours are red and blue.
Yeah.
Everything is now, and got to be quick. White's obsession with this rule-based system boxes itself in all the time. I mean, I've seen you play your Yashan CDH stacks list.
Yeah.
And even you sometimes are like, well, I can't do anything either. I'm just going to swing 2 combat damage at you and hope I kill you eventually.
I mean, that's kind of the irony of the stacks deck as it exists in CDH is actually because everyone else is obsessed with maybe their individualism, their singular combo they're looking for, just slowing everyone down is a win con in CDH. Yep. There are lists that are called win conless stacks. They don't actually have no win cons because combat is a win con, and actually that's all they're relying on.
And a 2/2 Gaddock Teague is going to eventually kill someone.
I mean, ironically, that my commander is a 4/4 in my CDH list, Yashan.
Yeah.
Yashan is like effectively unblockable in CDH.
Yes.
There are so few creatures with more than 4 power.
Niv Mizzet is a 5/5.
Yeah,
Thank
good
you very
luck.
much.
Good luck resolving Niv Mizzet without your fast mana, bro.
True. Can't tap artifacts. Can't
Yep.
sack my treasures. Fuck you, Sean, man. Alright, look, I think that, that's part of the problem with White's obsession, but I think the other part of this obsession is that it often values these smaller crimes in a very particular way. Like, you know how I was saying, stealing is wrong and murder is wrong?
Yeah.
Often White will punish stealing in the same way as murder.
Right. There's only right and wrong, and therefore all things that are wrong deserve the same punishment.
Correct. If you, any person I believe in the modern world would be like, oh, stealing is less of a crime than murder.
Yeah.
And in our court systems, in the real world, it is.
Yes.
You will get maybe a fine, maybe some jail time, depending on what you steal. If you commit murder, I guarantee you're not going to receive a fine.
No, you're definitely going to prison. It's just a question of how long.
Yes,
you're
exactly.
going to prison for. Yeah.
And I think that this is... There's a philosopher, Immanuel Kant, who I know you're familiar with.
Yes.
Very, one of the founding fathers of Western philosophy, is strongly considered to be. And he has a really interesting take on morality. And his take on morality was, it's basically subjective to the moment and the person. And the strong example that he pulled up was lying.
Right.
Because everyone would agree lying's bad. Being an honest person is good. You
shouldn't lie, basically.
Abe Lincoln was referred as Honest Abe because that's a good quality about him. He was honest.
Yeah.
However, Immanuel Kant kind of proposed this idea of what happens if your best friend is being hunted. Imagine me, Walt, being hunted, and I'm hiding in your house.
Yeah.
And someone knocks at the door and says, "Do you know where James is?"
Yeah. Yeah, I do. He's just through there.
And then I get shot and killed. See, you didn't lie, good boy.
Right.
But I'm now dead.
Yeah, no, you're dead.
Yes.
Yeah.
Horrifically dead.
Yeah.
So you're fine
I didn't
with this?
do it. Wasn't me.
Okay, so your morality is absolved.
No, obviously, yes.
In
if
that
someone knocks on
situation-
the door, I should say, I don't know, James, who's that?
Yeah, because you care about me.
Yes.
But this is the interesting thing. If you say lying is not okay,
and you're like hard and fast
staunchly like lying
is
should
never
ever
alright.
lie.
Yeah.
If that happened and
I would be morally obligated to myself to tell the truth
and get me killed.
You would die. Yeah. No, that's true. And I think this is the nature of a lot of philosophy is you land at a position that you think is reasonable and then someone says, okay, what about in this instance? And you go, well, I can't apply that logic here. So I've got to find some way through this murky water to the other side where I feel I am being moral and sticking to my scruples, but not contradicting myself.
It's hard. And I think
difficult.
this is why, at the very start of this episode, I said good in philosophy is impossible to define. It's impossible.
Yeah.
And this pretty good segue into like the enemies and allied colors of white. Because obviously black and red, said it before, these are the enemy colors of white. Now, if you haven't listened to the previous episode, The Philosophy of Color, we explained that it's a really easy way to identify which colors are allies and which colors are enemies, because on the back of the magic card, the 5 dots arranged in that kind of pentagram circle,
often called Wurundjeri because they're always laid out in the order of white, blue, black, red, green.
Correct. These are in this specific arrangement for a very specific reason. The colors that are next to each other on the color pie are ally colors. The ones that are across from each other, they're enemy colors.
So in the case of white, we've got blue on one side and green on the other side. So those are the two allies. And the two enemies are black and red.
So why are black and red the enemies then? Well, it's pretty easy to like break it down. Black values itself. That is like the exact juxtaposition of valuing the community.
I am always reminded of a very old black card. It's one of the quintessential draw 3 cards, lose 3 life sort of effects called Ambition's Cost.
Yes.
And it seems very poetic to me about Black's desire and how it gets there of saying, I am ambitious, I will get what I need, it will come at a cost. But I'm willing to pay it, is sort of what Black would say there.
Yeah, so like in terms of the selfishness, White would see that as selfish.
Yes, absolutely.
And an individualist, whereas, so Black threatens the community and the unity of White's ideology.
Yes.
Red, on the other hand, that color values freedom of individual action. It wants to be free. And that threatens the order aspect of White's philosophy.
Sure.
So when you combine them, it's like peace is never going to be achieved.
No, not
if
with black
these
and
two
red.
colors are combined. Like you think about the Rakdos Guild on Ravnica. Just look at any Rakdos card.
It's pure chaos, carnage,
individual expression in like BDSM gear. It's like some situations.
I mean, you
it's
also
like,
see kind of like rock concert vibes.
Yes.
Like there's Rakdos the showstopper.
like anarchy kind of. Yeah,
but like kind of in a fun way. It's like fun anarchy.
Yeah. I really want to hear that guitar solo on his massive axe.
I mean, I think didn't Command Zone animate Rakdos the
They
Showstopper?
totally did.
Just like a little boogie. You should check out that episode if you can find it. It's very fun.
That's hilarious. Okay, well, I mean, that's pretty easy to define, but in terms
Sure.
of the allies, on either side of White, we have blue and green.
Yes.
So in blue, there is a very similar value that blue holds to White, which is progression. Blue is very focused on this idea that it will grow its understanding, and blue looks at it through knowledge and intelligence, but White looks at blue and sees that familiarity of a forethought. Is I am thinking about where my next steps are going to be, and I'm doing that carefully.
Yeah.
Whereas black and red do that very kind of, I'm going to be here, so I'm going to do it. Blue is doing it by like, maybe I need a research grant from my, to do my PhD, I need to apply to a university grant and all that kind of stuff. So when White looks at blue, it goes, oh, you're careful and considerate. I like that.
It's interesting when you combine them together and you get the Azorius Guild, who
Yes.
are Azor, I have an Azor, the
Lawbringer.
Lawbringer deck. It's very explicitly about law and order and structure. And look, it plays out in a way that can seem positive, but you equally have cards that are explicitly Azorius, like Azor's Interlocutors, I believe it's called, who are literally engaging in, what's it called? Filibustering. You put a filibuster counter on them. So filibustering is a political strategy whereby you take up as much time as possible during the debate so that it goes so long that everyone gives up.
Yeah.
That's your way of winning the argument. You know you can't win it philosophically or by engaging in argument properly, so you just prolong the debate as long as you possibly can, and that card wins you the game if you can just delay it long enough.
It's also really interesting, you know how I planeswalked to chess not long ago?
Yes.
Filibustering is also kind of a chess strategy. You can run down your opponent's clock.
Yes.
If you just put them in situations where you have to make them think, you just win on time.
Yep.
Interesting.
Very
and
much.
so in green, on the other side of white, what does white see in green? It's the community aspect.
Yeah.
You talked about it before in the Philosophy of Color episode with your mono green Moe deck. You have this feeling that like the strength of each other are going to grow together because these creatures care about other creatures getting +1 counters when they get +1 counters, so they're going to grow all together.
Yes.
And that's a mono green deck. But isn't that such a white philosophy?
Oh, yes, white, green are my two favorite colors of Magic.
Yeah.
I love the way they interact with one another because you get this real feeling of oneness and
Harmony.
Harmony, unity of purpose, and you get to see a lot of really beautiful cards. And art that are from these things. I think about cards like Tristani Discordant, which is ironically kind of a sad time in this history of this Lesnia Guild.
True.
But even the art on that is still very beautiful because it's beautiful natural environment and it's at least an attempt at harmony. You know, you can see they're trying to come together. They're trying to be one.
And I really do love the fact that you are green and white and I am red and blue.
Yeah.
Because they're both complete enemies as guilds, but the blue shares with white and the red and is like the juxtaposition of white. It's really interesting. I think maybe white's philosophy of togetherness is better because together we make a pretty good podcast, I reckon.
Yeah. And together we can eliminate black.
Yes. Oh wait, no, I need them sometimes.
Oh,
some of my decks.
Fine.
Some of my decks, I need them sometimes.
Fine.
All right. Well, look, in terms of like a commander game,
sure,
the color philosophy
we
of
do
white,
play that.
Yes, that's what our podcast is about.
Yeah.
I think that the philosophy of white is actually really visible in a commander game more than most formats. Because commander games generally go for longer. I think that white's an interesting color when it's given a longer time to stretch out. Because its philosophy is very future-based. It's going for a goal. It's going for this like peace, unity, order kind of end goal. So you see it play out in a really white way.
Yeah.
One of the key things that I'm thinking of is it's really good at buffing a lot of creatures.
Yeah, I mean, we get every anthem is green. These are effects that say... Sorry, that is white. I said green.
Wrong episode.
I was thinking of the one version that is green, which is Gaia's Anthem, which is an explicit color break from Future Sight.
Oh, yes, that was specifically designed
to be a color break. So
break.
every other card that says, like, explicitly, creatures you control get +1/+1. Or...
Well, Glorious Anthem is where that kind of term comes from.
The classic one. But there's even Dictate of Heliod is the same kind of thing.
Really good combat trick, too.
I love Marshall's Anthem. This is the 4-mana anthem, but you can multi-kick it for 1 and a white, and you return creature cards from your graveyard to the anthem. It's interesting that one is also bringing back Fallen Companions, so that's kind of it's interesting. White is actually quite good. After black, it's probably the best color at interacting with the graveyard, and I think it's about rewarding faith. I mean, there's a card called Faith's Reward,
yeah, true.
which says, if you can return all the stuff that you've put into the graveyard this turn to the battlefield. So it's almost like...
So have faith, it'll come back.
Yes.
Have faith and you'll get rewarded.
But you have to have the faith, because if you don't leave out the mana on that turn, you're not getting it back.
Yes.
It has to be then. It has to be now. You have to have faith.
Yes. I think that's really interesting when like the holy imagery then comes back into it. It's like this religious, like if you put your devotion to white's philosophy, it will reward you. A little bit of a side tangent, actually, in terms of mechanics that are inherently white. We'll talk about like a couple of them in a second, but I think interestingly, one that's shared by like all colours was the devotion mechanic from Theros.
Sure. So this is coming back in every Theros set, I believe.
Yes.
We've seen this in some form. This is the, like, Krufix, God of Horizons, is a god that says...
It's only a creature.
It's only a creature when you have devotion to green and blue of 7, I think. And then the monocolored ones are usually 5. They're the gods, but then there's also cards like... that explicitly say... like
Gary, Grey Merchant of Asphodel.
Yeah.
Is a really strong one.
Drains your opponent's equal to devotion to black.
Yeah.
Daxos, Blessed by the Sun, is a white one.
Yeah.
His toughness is equal to devotion to white. So he's literally gets stronger, effectively.
The more white permanents you have.
Yeah, the more devoted you are.
I find it really interesting that it's like Gary, for example, is like a black card that is very strong with the devotion mechanic. But it's interesting that in Theros Beyond Death, the story of that plane, the set that we had, the main character in that story was Elspeth, who at the time was struggling with her devotion and her belief in where she was going. And I think it's really interesting that she's a white-centered planeswalker. She has her philosophy based in white, and she struggled with her devotion. And that's what the story was about. It was a white-focused story.
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting that the plane that we were on had a mechanic that's based around something that is philosophically aligned with white.
Interesting. That's super interesting. I mean, I think Elspeth is probably, after Gideon, has to have the most mono-white Planeswalker cards.
For sure. She's had a good couple of reprints this year because of going to New Capenna, and
she's probably going to be back. I mean, I'm pretty sure that Elish Norn is like terrified of Elspeth.
Yeah.
Because I think Elspeth's like defeated her before.
I think it's that she represents the antithesis of like the completion, which is interesting.
I thought she like wrecked Elish Norn at some point in the story.
Possibly.
I think I heard that somewhere. Anyway,
we're not lore people, so if you've got like any insight onto that,
I mean, yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, but you said Elish Norn. Think about Elish Norn as a character. White character.
Yeah.
She's all about the completion of everything. Isn't that incredibly white?
Yeah, well, she definitely represents probably the epitome of the negative aspects of white. She's
totalitarianistic.
We must all be one and the same is like horrifying in the case, literally horrifying in the case of the way that the
gruesome.
The Phyrexians, that's the ones. They're getting to my mind.
The Eldrazi, they're all terrifying, the bad ones. Hideous monsters. But the Phyrexian ideology helmed by Elish Norn is terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely it is.
Anyway, I think that Mark Rosewater has like kind of listed a couple of other characters from like pop culture that he believes are white centric.
Okay.
One of the ones that he strongly believes that is super white centric is Superman.
Right.
A lot of people go, red, white, and blue because of his costume. But no, Superman is like white. Solidly monocolored white.
No, I totally see that. I think I remember reading somewhere that all good Superman stories, like, he is supposed to be this ever-powerful being, right? Like,
no one's going to beat Superman in fisticuffs.
No. So his fights are never about his strength in physical strength or his ability, or like, it's very rarely about that. And most of the best Superman stories are about him grappling with his own morality.
Yeah, well, you think about,
should I intervene? Should I be the one who does that? What kind of a man would I be if I did that? And
when he's put in situations where he has to make a choice based on morality, he's challenged. Like in Batman versus Superman, the one where he either has to fight Batman or his mum dies. Kind of thing. That's like a really strong thing for him to deal with as a character because it's morality based.
Yeah, definitely. Interesting.
I think something else that White's really good at in Commander that we see it play out all the time is life gain. I think that is a really good mechanic for White. You actually mentioned a card that I was thinking of around this, which was Daxos, Blessed by the Sun.
Oh, yeah. So this is whenever a creature ETBs or dies on your battlefield, you gain a life.
Yep. Yeah. Same thing with Soul Warden, Impassioned Orator.
Yeah.
All these white creatures care about more other creatures coming into the battlefield. And isn't that, like, when you see it on the board, especially I love it when white players, specifically like token soldiers kind of players, don't just put a dice on their token. They put like multiple copies of the token onto the battlefield. So when they have 10 soldiers, there are 10 1/1 soldiers.
I also love that.
I think it just looks so much cooler on a battlefield. And also, it absolutely epitomizes what White's about, is collecting this group force of people to believe in something. And the cards like Daxos Blessed by the Sun, Impassioned Orator, they reward you for doing that.
Well, and it's interesting, the payoffs for life gain are often white as well. I mean, we have like Archangel of Thune is the 5 mana creature that says whenever you gain life, put that many +1 counters on every creature you control. So that's explicitly saying like our strength will unite us and make us stronger. There's also, I've just looked it up now, which is probably why you can see me tapping on my phone. Nykthos Paragon, similar thing.
That card is strong.
This is the 6 mana creature that says whenever you gain life, you may put that many +1 counters on each creature you control. Do this only once each turn. So slightly worse than Archangel of Thune. But this guy looks like the most quintessential white creature you've ever seen in your entire life.
He's like standing there with a big sword and shield.
Yeah.
He's like standing on a hill, like very preachy.
Oh my
almost.
god, listen to this flavor text. Though Heliod turned against humanity in his hunger for power, the ideals he once championed still stand strong. Isn't that the most white flavor text you've ever heard in your life?
Yeah, he got corrupted with the bad motivations of White.
Yes, but we will still stay true to ourselves.
But we believe.
Yeah, we believe. Trademark.
Blessed be Heliod's name.
Oh, he's getting corrupted.
That card is terrifying. Terrifying. And interesting how he's corrupted with blue in his color identity. What does that tell you on a philosophical basis?
Very interesting. Very interesting.
I think some other mechanics that White does really well. I think the defensiveness of White, it's generally a very good color that defends itself really well.
We talked about cards like pacifism and those sorts of effects that say, like, you can't attack me.
Yeah. I mean, even Ghostly Prison is a great example of that.
Totally.
Players can't attack you unless they pay you 2 for each attacking creature. Mark Rosewater actually identified that White has the highest toughness to power ratio. So out of all the colors, White has bigger butts. Essentially, out of all of the colors, White have bigger butts.
I mean, I think about a card like Jareth Leonin Titan. This is like the 4/7, and whenever it blocks, it gets +7/+7 until end of turn.
You're never gonna
crazy.
You're never gonna be able to attack into that thing.
You're literally never gonna get through.
No.
It's
and you'll
wild.
most likely lose a creature to
it. It's definitely very good at saying, stay away. Stop it.
I think that like mechanics, like keywords like vigilance, are really, really key to understanding White's defensive nature. Like, if I do attack, I still want to be able to defend my position.
I will be prepared,
You think about all those 2/2 samurais with vigilance from Kamigawa, Neon Dynasty. They are so strong just because of those vigilance keywords.
I think they were the only samurai tokens in the set. I might be mistaken, but I think they've pretty explicitly said, samurai tokens are white. So that's even interesting to say. You know, samurai were people who lived a very strict code.
Yes.
So it's interesting they said that they are vigilant and they are white.
Yes, very good point. I think obviously it would be amiss of us to not mention the quintessential protection card, Teferi's Protection.
Yeah. Talk about moral code, though. Teferi saying, I will protect the whole plane.
At the cost of myself as well. Like, I'm just getting the common good. Boom, I'm going to use the whole thing.
Speaking of common good, we have mentioned Gideon already. I think we have to mention that the most quintessential white planeswalker, Gideon, sacrificed himself to save a friend because it was the right thing to do.
Yeah. They're altruists.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
At the core component.
Yeah.
It's interesting where White is, yes, the defensive color. I think it is also generally quite proactive in its attack. It's interesting. It's like really defensive.
Yes.
Yet soldiers. They're the token in White. It's literally saying, I'm assembling an army. I might not attack yet, but when I do,
there'll be lots of us.
You're gone.
Yeah.
Like, it's like very proactive. I think it has to like set up its board to then attack. Like, you're not going to attack with 2 1/1 tokens, but you'll attack with those 2 1/1 tokens when you've got Glorious Anthem down, 6+1 counters on each of them.
Yeah.
And they've got like vigilance.
Definitely.
It's really interesting. Cards that like have training and mentor on them are often white as well. These new, like, training was a really interesting mechanic from Was it Midnight Hunt?
Crimson Vow, I think. Yeah.
One of the ones from Innistrad.
Yeah, might even have been both. But this is the mechanic where when a creature attacks with a creature with greater power, it gets +1 counter. So if you attack with a 2/2 creature and a 1/1 that has training, the creature that has training puts a +1 counter on itself because it's attacking with a creature with greater power.
But like you can see, it's rewarding you as the player in the Commander game to play to its ideologies.
Well, yeah, I mean, even a card that I absolutely adore that has 3 white pips in it, so it's definitely a white card.
Really white?
True Conviction.
Oh yeah,
This is the enchantment that gives your creatures double strike and lifelink. Arguably some of the best keywords in the game.
Yeah, especially when paired together.
Gives you both of them permanently, and it's called True Conviction. This is very much saying together we can do anything.
And I believe so strongly in what I
believe so strongly that I can do anything, really. Yeah.
I think also interestingly that cards like Settle the Wreckage are these like very defensive cards, but almost like proactive in their not proactive. I'm going to use the word provocative in their use. They're
quite reactive, really.
Yeah.
It says like, don't come near me. If you do, there will be consequences.
And by consequences, bye-bye.
Yeah, everything's gone.
Yeah.
Settle the Wreckage. There's also the Winds of Abandon is kind of a similar sort of thing.
Yeah,
I mean, that one's a sorcery, so it's sort of a bit more proactive.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting that they always give something back as well. It's sort of like, well, you can have all your creatures be gone.
Yeah.
And you can have some land instead.
Have a field.
Yeah.
Think about what you've done.
Have a field. Go stand in it.
I don't have dynamite laid out in that field at all. But I think that White is so like concerned with just destroying something straight out. There's like not many cards in White that just say destroy target creature.
No.
It's interesting.
It normally has to be attacking or blocking, right?
Yeah, well, the cards that I'm thinking of specifically, like Defined Verdict and Fierce Retribution, they only care about the attacking and blocking creature, and then they will kill it.
Yeah.
So it basically says, don't stand in my way, or don't oppose me and come and fight my ideologies. I just think it's really interesting that White doesn't go about destroying its opponents in the typical way that we expect a kill spell to work.
No.
You have to either set it up with like, you know, or even like the pacifism effects.
Yeah.
It doesn't want to kill it, it just wants to make sure it can't oppose it.
Yeah. I even think of, there's a card I was thinking of putting in one of my decks recently, or putting back in one of my decks, Devouring Light. This is a 3-mana instant for 1 white that exiles target attacking or blocking creature, and it has Convoke.
Ooh.
So this can be a free spell in a token deck because you just tap 3 creatures
You can just
that are
hold
white.
4 white up. Yeah.
3 white. Yeah.
3 white. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
3 white creatures, and you can just exile 2 white and a green even, and exile. But it has to be an attacking or blocking creature.
Yeah.
So it still says.
I like the flavor that it has Convoke as well. It's incentivizing you to have creatures.
Yeah.
Like you build your army.
Well, and it's sort of saying like my soldiers are ready.
Yes.
You know, you can come here, but you'll be devoured by the light. You know, it's I love
standing on the parapets.
Yeah, it's very like, you know, it's very moralistic, and it can feel, you know, preachy and didactic at times, the White philosophy, but I love when it feels right. It's sort of like when Captain America gets to punch a baddie.
Oh, you're like, oh yes, you did it.
You did it.
The good win.
You persisted, and I knew you would get here, and you're finally here. You know, it's like it's rewarding.
Well, I think there's a couple of lessons we learn from White.
Definitely.
In the end of it all, this episode, we've gone pretty deep dive into White. We've been very critical.
Yes.
We've been pretty analytical, but I think the lessons we learn from White, together we are strong. When we look out for those below us, we all prosper. And we must be vigilant and protect the order that we create, otherwise our strength is greatly diminished. But when it comes to implementation of rules, we must tread lightly. Perhaps what we believe isn't best for everyone, in fact authoritarian in nature. Space Commanders, command received. Well, that was a big deep dive in White. And honestly, I'm really glad that we did it, because White is not good. It believes good things, but it's not good. Stop saying White's the good boy color.
Yeah, I'm glad we definitely busted that myth right into the ground.
Green is the good boy color because Moe exists.
Yeah, the goodest boy in the multiverse. Well, to the listeners out there, do you feel commanded? What do you think of the color white? Do you prescribe to its philosophy? And what aspect of its philosophy do you disagree with?
Yeah, and you can tell us, and really, I would love to engage in this conversation with our listeners. So you can send us an email, you can add us on Twitter, or join our Discord and chat with us and other members of our play group. This is genuinely the best place to talk with us about it, and I will happily jump on a Discord voice chat channel and talk to you about White's colour philosophy for a long time.
And I will happily point you to James and tell you to sit on a voice chat with James about the colour philosophy. No, I'm interested as well. I definitely haven't done the research so much, but I'm you know what? I'm feeling like I've learned a lot more.
I'm glad, and I know I'm glad that we started in White's colours because I knew it'd be interesting for you because that's half of your identity.
The best colour of magic.
Well, if you want to support our content, you can do so in a couple of ways. The first way, you can leave us a review on whatever platform you listen on. Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast is terrible, as we know. So if you listen on Google Podcast, just tell your friends about us. Yes, spread the good word.
Please do.
But the other way you can support us is very directly, and this is the best way to support our content, is on Patreon. It's linked in the show notes. There are heaps of really cool tiers on our Patreon. You can be a space cadet, you can be a lieutenant commander, or there's a bunch of different cool levels that you can get to, but the top tier, you can be a space commander yourself and receive some really cool perks, including playing with us in games every month, even possibly suggesting a podcast topic for us to discuss.
And speaking of the Space Commander tier, we would like to personally thank Fletcher Cutting for supporting us. We really, really appreciate it. You're the best.
You are absolutely the best. And thank you again to Palms Off Gaming for sponsoring this podcast. They're creating some awesome trading card accessories like boxes, sleeves, binders. Their pink one that they've just released looks awesome. I think that pink binder, the color is just, it's like bubblegum. It's gorgeous.
If you want to bling out your collection, if you're that kind of player, I reckon Palms Off is explicitly for you. They're definitely a go all out. I know that a lot of their products fit top loaders. That's kind of a bit of a shtick of theirs.
They have a top loader binder.
Yeah.
That if you're a collector, they're the people to go to.
If you want to bling out, they're definitely the way to go. So you can check them out at palmsoffgaming.com.au. Okay, that's the bulk of it, but it is tradition to planeswalk out of Magic and into somewhere else. I believe it's your turn, James. Where are we planeswalking to this time?
We are going to planeswalk to my parents' basement.
Oh.
Yeah. We got some old childhood photos of me in there.
Okay.
Some paint that was used to paint the walls.
We could smell that.
But more interestingly, we have my drum kit.
Okay.
In my parents' basement.
That's a relief. I was really thought you were going to be pulling out the jumper cables. I was not feeling good.
Oh, that's a terrifying image. No, my dad and I, when I was, how old would I have been? I would have been 17. We have this weird space under our house that's kind of like a basement, but not like a typical American basement where you access it from inside the house. You have to go outside and kind of go round and underneath.
Oh, your place is on a hill.
It is. Hey, so it's built into the hill.
Sure.
It's bizarre.
This is kind of the weird thing you get when you build on a hill, where you sort of build the house and start going backwards, and then you're well, there's a big empty space underneath the house now.
We have to put some kind of support structure for the house, otherwise it's going to fall in.
My dad, when he was renovating our childhood home, we were also building on a hill, and he realized at one point, if I just elevate the extended part of the house by 5 stairs, I can fit a whole level underneath. So he did.
Nice. A way to get 2 extra rooms.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
But in this space, we used to have motorbikes stacked up there when I used to race motocross.
Great.
But when we sold all the motorbikes and I stopped doing motocross, the space was empty for a long time. And that was really when I started playing in bands. And I used to store my drum kit in a storage space with my band. And then I realized, oh my God, I have a studio under the house.
Cool.
So
your dad plays drums as well, right?
He does, and he was the one that got me into drumming all those years ago. So my dad and I both invested in soundproofing insulation.
Cool.
We invested in some really cool blackout curtains, a big Union Jack rock and roll style flag on the back wall. I put in some fairy lights, and it became our underground drum studio.
Cool.
And recently I went back to my parents' place just to have dinner with them, and I was like, oh, you know what I've not done in a really long time? I've not got behind the drum kit, and I drummed. So I
that's great.
recently got back behind the drum kit, and honestly, like, I play the drums very rarely now, but like, it's a big part of my, like, I have a tattoo that says RLRR, which
This is a paradiddle, right?
yes, nice one, nice memory for
You've
it.
told me many
Yes.
times.
Well, the best comment that I've ever got with this RLRR, because it's a paradiddle, which is right, left, right, right, which
Yes.
is the kind of the way you play it with your hands. So you play right hand, left hand, right hand, right hand.
Yeah.
The best comment I ever got was, does it mean 1 in 4 people are left-handed?
Yes, I've got a statistic on my
Yes, I make sure that the left-handed awareness is spread.
He actually stuffed up. I really wanted him to write 2, 5, and then the percent sign, but he stuffed up really badly.
But yeah, look, drumming has been like such a big part of my life for such a long time. Like, I used to play in bands. I used to, I played shows in Melbourne.
Yeah.
It used to be like my after school activity. But I very rarely do it now. Obviously, like, living in an apartment, it's a bit hard to have a drum kit.
Yep, absolutely.
But also, yeah, it's just a hard thing to fit in. But I realized it's such a meditative thing for me.
Very cathartic, I
Yeah,
imagine.
well, you know how you meditate in the morning and you take like a good while to kind of come to collect your thoughts for the day and get ready.
Yeah.
Drumming is like, for me, at the end of the day, how to empty all those thoughts out of your mind to then relax into the night. And not because I play like metal and I play a lot of jazz, they're very physical exercise, like very tiring, like I'm sweating buckets.
Yeah.
And it tires me out. And I've never slept better than after a 2-hour drumming session with Dad and just feeling bliss. My dad actually calls drumming meditating on a drum stool.
That's beautiful. Well, anyone who has played Commander with you in person knows that you're drumming all over the table, so I'm glad that you're spending at least some of that time drumming on drums.
Actual drum kit, that's true. I apologize for all the tables that I'm tapping on, or the legs that are bouncing under the table.
It's endearing. It's definitely endearing.
I'm glad. I do tap on the Commander table quite a lot,
do
though.
a lot.
I'm wondering if my playmat along the edge is just going to get worn because
or your basic lands at the very bottom are just going to have little ring marks on the side
I
of
knew
them.
there's a reason why I have to replace my sleeves all the time. All right, Commander players.
That's all
I reckon
from us.
that's it from us. But we'll see you next week for another episode of Get Commander Podcast. Woohoo!